Hey there, guys and girls. Welcome to another episode of The Finner with me, Stuart Bell. I am a business advisor working with financial planners, accountants, and mortgage brokers, and I'm founder of Audere Coaching and Consulting, the most unspellable consulting group in the world. In this episode of The Finnovator, I want to talk to you about client experience. Client experience popped up as a real area of focus about 2018, 2019. And I, for my sins, became kind of a real speaker on this. I spoke at a number of events down the country, unpacking client experience, talking about its value to firms, talking about the first 90 days, talking about the review experience. And I think primarily because I really do resonate with this. To give you a bit of background to this, and by the way, this session is all about how to map out client experience. In other words, once you've decided that you want to deliver something and you want to buy into this, how can you create a sequence of touch points and communications over a course of, 90 days or a year that you can systematize, template, and then get your team to deliver for you in a consistent and reliable way. But let me give you a bit of background, because one of my favorite 2-day workshops I ran as part of the program was on the topic of client experience, and I ran it at Bridge Climb here in Sydney. Now, if you've not done Bridge Climb, if you've done it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. If you've not done it, Bridge Climb was actually, Bridge Climb in Sydney Harbour Bridge was one of the first ever commercial bridge climbs. And it was started by a guy called, I think Paul Cave in, the late 90s. And he'd actually gone up the bridge with the entrepreneurial organization, EO. And he just thought, this is amazing. More people should do it. And the background to it is he was given 100 odd reasons by the 3 government bodies that controlled the Sydney Harbour Bridge as to why he couldn't do it. And over a 10-year period, he solved each one of them. And as a result, was allowed to start what ended up becoming an incredibly successful business, delivering a great experience. Now, the amazing thing about the experience is you arrive there with the idea of going to the top of the bridge and getting the film or the photo. But what you're assailed with is how incredible the business model is. You go in there, and from the moment you walk in, it's almost like a human conveyor belt. I actually had a good friend of mine, Oliver, who worked there, and he indicated that not only is this an incredible business geared up to deliver this experience, everything from the way, you get your kitted up, to the briefing, to the guide who takes you across the bridge, to this little guide rail mechanism that keeps you attached to it at all times. But in behind it is essentially manned and staffed predominantly by transient staff, backpackers and the like. So it's an incredible training system. But the interesting thing about the bridge climb is it shows the stark difference between value proposition and experience. Because people don't rock up to do bridge climb because of the experience, because of the stories you're told along the way, because of the blue suits. They rock up for one simple reason, that's to get the photo at the top of the bridge. But what makes them come back and tell others about it is that experience. In other words, value proposition is what they want. Client experience is what they actually get that they weren't expecting to. Or as someone asked me the other day, what's the difference between service offer and client experience? Service offer is what you deliver. Client experience is how it makes them feel. So what I'm going to walk you through here is, I think, something that if you're interested in differentiating your practice, and why client experience has become such a hot topic is because in industries where there is difficulty or constraints around product pricing, where it's really difficult for consumers to differentiate one thing for another, client experience is the huge differentiator. And more so, it has in the last few years become the number one leading indicator of why many consumers choose one service over another. So jump in. In this one, I hope to share with you how I've helped a number of businesses to get clear on what client experience is, and more importantly, how to map it out and systematize it and turn it into something that can be delivered to every new client or every existing client, depending on where they are in the relationship with your firm. As always, if you'd like to get access to supplementary tools and also obviously the video recording of this session being delivered, which includes the visuals, I would strongly suggest heading over to success.audere.com.au and sign up to become a member of our best practice success portal, where is exactly the same place that I work with my existing clients, and also I maintain contact with my previous clients. So you'll get access to a bunch of resources, as well as the ability to kind of see what it looks like within the program, and maybe even get involved and interact with some other members of the community in Australia, in Canada, in the US, in Europe, and a whole bunch else. With that all said, let's jump in and let's unpack the client experience in mapping the experience. Hey there, welcome to the the training, I should say, mapping the experience. Client experience for me is an incredibly important part of the program of what I do. And it's become increasingly important for a whole bunch of reasons that if you've watched the intro to this particular topic, you'll know that one of the things I pointed out is in industries where sort of product or product differentiation has become difficult for whatever reason. Maybe it's because it's all perceived by consumers to be very similar, or alternatively, the options are sort of restricted, or alternatively price is, becomes difficult to sort of move around, which I know with everything that's gone on in our industry, it's hard now to compete on low price, really nearly impossible, or at least for the time being. This experience thing becomes a major differentiator. So in this module, I'm going to give you the sort of basis of it. I'm going to talk you through how to start the whole client experience journey off correctly by starting with the important work of mapping out what yours is supposed to be and really understanding that aspect of it. To do so, I want to start with a really big intro and an idea and an overview, and we're going to draw from various different case studies or examples of this as we go. Because let's be honest, there are some industries out there that do this exceptionally well. And I think being able to look into other industries, it's certainly something that has been really, really useful and powerful for me personally. I think it's powerful for our businesses. Being insular is just the enemy of innovation, the enemy of progress. And as we go through this, I'm going to draw from a real live case study from Airbnb. This is Brian, Brian Chemsky, is one of the founders of Airbnb. And he gave a podcast interview a while back, which was just so enlightening, where they unpacked what lessons that he and the other founders of Airbnb had learned from taking Airbnb from 50 web hits a day to having $31 billion revenue within 8 years. Now, that is an incredible journey. I mean, to go from a situation where they're getting less web traffic per day than many of you may be getting on your website, to a point where they're now, they've completely disrupted the hotel industry and they're recognized as being, an extremely powerful and progressive company in their space, is just mind blowing when you actually sit down and think about it. But the genesis and the basis of how they did it, a lot of it was about client experience. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to unpack some of the lessons they learned, and we're going to use that as fuel to guide our own journey in mapping out not just what we want to deliver, because that's an important part of it, but how we want what we deliver to impact clients, how we want them to feel, what we want them to do, what we want them to not do, what we want them to change, how we want their behavior to modify, which really is the basis of helping you to deliver value, keep them engaged, and keep them focused on the right things. So, why you would approach this, or if you're a business who has done this in the past or not done it, and you're kind of approaching this, these are some of the challenges that many businesses face when they start working on client experience. They start looking at how that relates to what they're delivering. The first one for me is when you've got a business, when you've got a package or a proposition, which isn't just focused on delivering stuff. You've got a bunch of things on a list that you deliver to your platinum clients, and you've just always done it. You've already done quarterly reports. You've always done quarterly reviews, or you've always done certain things in a certain way, or long form reports, and you've never taken a step back to go, hold on a moment. Firstly, is my business best served by doing it? But maybe even you're at a point where it's getting too much. You're having to do too much stuff, and you're kind of looking at it going, this is so much I'm on the hook for. There are so many things that if I don't do, I could end up, tying my own noose, so to speak, without being too dark and depressing about it. The other thing is, when you put stuff out there and you don't get engagement, you don't get things back. I had an accounting client I'd been working with for a while, and we started to talk about this client engagement piece. And sure enough, they had a process of following up clients about their BAS statements and getting the data back. And something like 60% of clients would get it back either a day or two before the deadline or afterwards. And really, that's an example of them putting out communications and having a process for doing something, but it's not getting the result. It's not getting the engagement. And that's one of those areas where looking at how the experiences can really help. Finally, I see a lot of businesses that do a lot of work already. They read a lot of stuff. They have a lot of one-to-one conversations. They put out a lot of content, but they don't get the engagement, or they don't leverage it. And I want to, off the back of this, help you to identify ways that you could take stuff you're already doing, but most clients don't know about, and put it out to the world. Or alternatively, do some things that you're doing really, really well, but take you a lot of effort and do them more easily. The worst case scenario, if you don't get the work, you don't do the work on this stuff and don't get on top of mapping this out and getting in a good shape, is you get this disconnect between what you're delivering and how you see it should impact the client and what happens at the other end. That, the intention doesn't equal the results. However, if we go through this process and we get it right, what we do is we unlock some key benefits for your business. One of the most important ones is we might end up cutting a bunch of stuff out. We might end up adding some stuff which is really, really simple, but it creates this value equation. And when we create a value equation, or we stack your business, your offer and your delivery and your experience with value instead of effort, and we have even some stuff where the effort's low, but the value's high, we get this beautiful equilibrium between value and cost, and that's where profit comes. The second area is we start to build an audience. When we get around to talking about communication, we're going to go into more of this, but I want you to get to a point where your client base see you as one of the most important sources of financial information for themselves and ideally their family. And they start to look to you for information, because when you do this, you start to get more and more traction. It is an absolute, something I want to see change, that we've got so many personal finance bloggers or financial experts out there, but so few of them are actually financial advisors. I'd like to see that change. That's why in 5 years when I wrote Finnovation, the book, I was lamenting the fact that there weren't more practices out there innovating in the tech space. Now there's a lot of practices out there doing this. Is the next bit, to innovate and get more leaders from advice practices in this, in the online, authority marketing space. If you get this right, it gets easier. As I said, we're going to look for some ways to move some things out and structure things better. But I reckon there's an opportunity along the way for you to adopt some ways of doing things which are going to suit you and suit your team, and they're going to take some of the pressure off. If we get this right, ultimately a good experience, when it's mapped out on paper and it's planned and we can then move into the next phase, is it gets all the ducks lined up in a row, and it gives you the opportunity to amplify not just what you could do, but all the things you're currently doing, and really bring it to the fore. So if you're on board with that, let's jump in. Let's talk about some key principles. 5 things, if we get these right, they're going to guide it well. And I mentioned I'm going to bring sort of the A, B, and B discussion to the fore here, which is exactly what I'm going to do. So let's just jump in. Okay, so principle number 1 is this idea of we have to have the ability to kind of get personal. What I remember that is we've got to get the ability to get inside of the heads of your clients. Now, you've already done the work with me on value proposition and target market and avatar building. You kind of got a bit of a head start here, but the reason we want to do that, the degree of understanding we want to get to, is kind of, to me, where the point we can almost understand how they're going to behave, where they're going to get demotivated, where they're going to question the decision, and we can act before it happens. If you've ever seen the movie Inside Out, if you're a parent, you probably have. If you're not a parent, you haven't. It's great. It's one of those movies that's definitely adult, kid friendly. For those of you who are adults and you've watched it, you'll know it's still a great movie. It's about this teenage girl who's moved from rural America. She's moving to San Francisco. Dad's got a great job. And she's going through this whole experience of moving schools. Everything's being uprooted. It's not seeing her dad as much. Big routine change. And inside her head, as they've been there since she was a baby, are these characters who are kind of controlling the way she feels. There's sadness, joy, anger, envy, and disgust, and each of them obviously has a different role to play. But to cut the noise, cut to the point of why I wanted to put this out there. The key to being able to deliver a great experience is when you can kind of see inside people's head and understand when each of these motivations are likely to come to the fore, and almost you can pull the buttons. You can pull the motivation, you can pull the information button, you can pull the involvement button, you can pull the excitement and motivation button, because you know how to do it. Let me give you the case study and the reason why this is really, really important. During the interview I mentioned, Brian Chemsky shared the number 1 most important sort of lesson they'd learn along the way. He said, it's really important to pay attention. He made the observation, and it's absolutely true. It's really hard to get even 10 people to love anything unless you first spend a ton of time with them. Tony Robbins often says that you cannot influence someone until you first understood once what's already influencing them. And anybody with kids will know, you don't need kids to understand that, but it's much easier to get people to sort of align with what you want to do if you can also align what you're aiming to do with something that they're desiring to do as well. So in their case, they would literally go and knock on the door of their first hosts and go, hey, this is Brian, Joe, we're founders, we wanted to meet you, and they would ask questions. By the way, this was a strategy which Jeff Bezos is renowned for doing when he was launching Amazon. He would have conversations with strangers in coffee shops about their buying habits, about their fears of buying online, and we all know how the Amazon story has progressed. And from this experience of speaking to their customers, what they found out is that many of their hosts didn't feel comfortable with certain guests without the lack of information, so they wanted guest profiles in Airbnb. They wanted photos of the people. They wanted to know who they were, where they worked. And I get that, right? If you're having someone stay in your house, who wouldn't want to know that information? And a lot of what they built out of the community stuff came from those discussions. So as you're mapping your experience, I'm going to give you a bunch of templates and tools and a whole bunch of stuff, which you can grab, personalize. It's going to give you fuel for thought. It's going to give you raw materials. But nonetheless, one of the most important things you can do is try and understand what's people's experiences when they start working with you. What about that middle point in the journey when you haven't spoken for a while? What about as they come in for review? And more easily you can understand how it feels to be on the other end of it. When the communication goes dry, when they get confused about what's supposed to happen. All of that sort of stuff. The more easily you can jump in and go, that's a point at which we can change the frame of the engagement. We can change the experience just by doing the right thing at the right point in time. Okay, let's talk about principle number 2. If you think about, or if you've ever seen the movie Spinal Tap, it's pretty old now, but it's still a great movie. There's this scene where one of the musicians, he's talking about this amplifier he's bought, where it's actually been custom made for him, and the volume dial on the amplifier goes up to 11. There's a funny sort of discussion between him and the interviewer as to why he just didn't make it 10 louder. But anyway, well, the point is, in the interview, the drummer kind of gets, or the musician gets the idea that 11 is special, right? Most amplifiers go up to 10. This one goes up to 11 because it's special. And the reason we're putting this in front is when you're putting together your experience, I want you to be thinking not just about what do we do now, what do other businesses do, but I want you to be thinking about what could you do that is a little bit special, that is a little bit extra. In other words, what is your 11-star service model? Now, we know what 5-star looks like, probably know what 6-star looks like, but I want you to take it a bit further and sort of progress it and say, well, if I was 10 years in the future, or if we had millions of dollars worth of resources to build the most amazing technology, or I had a team of the most amazing people, what would I do differently? What would I change? I read a while ago about one business who worked with executives, and what they would do is they'd book a seat on the plane next to them in business class, and that's where they do their review. That to me is an 11. Maybe, you built your own virtual platform whereby you can do virtual meetings, but you do headsets. Everyone gets a headset when they come on board, and you sit on the beach and you do your financial planning review meeting on the beach, right? Or maybe you have a bot that you had custom built that rather than does a fact find, the client puts a fingerprint in the bot and it goes off and it gets all the data and it comes back and it's done within 20 minutes. Now, I get that a lot of what we're talking about, bots that gather data, that would be awesome. But it's interesting when you go through this ideation phase, when you start to think, well, let's just pull down all those walls and think about if resources or time or money or technology wasn't a barrier, what would actually be possible? And it's interesting because a lot of the best ideas, some of the things which, you might think of 20 things and 19 of them might be totally unreasonable, but there's one where you go, well, we might not be able to do it exactly like that, but we could do something similar. Those are the bits that you want to look for, which are going to make your experience really, really special. Again, I'm going to draw from the Airbnb case study here because this is exactly how they approached building a key part of their business. The observation Brian made, and it's absolutely spot on. If you ask anyone how to improve your business, they'll always suggest something small. You could have, coffee on arrival. And that's fair enough because, most people when they're looking for something, they're thinking about what's possible for you. But if you ask bigger questions, you start to create a bit of we can't think like that anymore, and you've got to think differently. You break down some barriers. Peter Thiel has a similar question. He used to ask startup founders, if you had to achieve 10 years worth of progress in 6 months, what would you do differently? And the reason this works as a question because it breaks the boundaries of reasonable, and it enforces a requirement of you to think bigger and think differently. So in their case, the approach they took is they started from the best they had and they got silly. They said, okay, well, Airbnb, what's a 5-star Airbnb experience? And then once they defined that, they went, okay, that's great. We've got that down. But what's a 6-star experience? Great that we put that down. They go, okay, let's pop forward. 6, 7, 8. What is an 8-star? If that's a 6-star, what's an 8-star? What's a 10-star? And then eventually it got to an 11-star, which in their case was kind of ridiculous. And the point of the process is that, you know what, in most cases, 9-star, 10-star, 11-star are not going to be feasible. But when you go back, you start to notice a sweet spot that exists. And the point he made is sometimes you have to devise the extreme. You have to break the boundaries in order to come back. And that's the kind of stuff that creates a great experience. This is actually their version. And there's a worksheet, by the way, in the pack that if you want to work through this with your team, have a bit of fun on maybe on a Friday, get some ideas flowing and get outside your own heads and into sort of a very different space. This would be useful. But theirs was really simple. They defined, they started all the way from 1 star. What's the worst 1-star Airbnb experience you'd have? And absolutely spot on. You knock on the door a few times, you wait around 20 minutes, nobody's there, you go home. You find another hotel. That's pretty bad. What about a 2-star? Well, you knock on the door. There's a note on the floor saying we'll be back in 20 minutes. You wait around. It's cold. It's dark. There's no toilet. You need to go to the loo. Eventually the host shows up. Doesn't say sorry, lets you in, gives you the keys. The place is a mess. You get the idea. What about a 5-star? Okay, this is what we expect. We expect when we go to Airbnb, the host will knock you. You knock on the door. The host lets you in. Alternatively, the host isn't there. The keys are there. The place is clean. You come in. It's exactly as you expect it to be. And similarly, what's your 5-star experience? Well, the 5-star experience in your practice might be your client rocks up at the meeting. The receptionist knows their name, greets them by name. They sit down. They get offered coffee. They're not waiting too long. They come in. The office is clean. It's tidy. The advisor is prepared. Everything is printed out in nice paper. They run through it. It doesn't take too long. It's not shambolic. Nobody interrupts the meeting. Afterwards, everything they need to is summed up in an email. This is your 5-star experience. You get where I'm going with this? Similarly with your first appointment, we can go through a similar experience, but you get the idea. Okay, so let's break through here. If that's what we expect in Airbnb's case, they were like, what's the 6-star? By the way, we're now at that phase where it's phases of feasibility. Remember this said 9 and 10 and 11 is probably not unlikely. Well, this is generally where you start and you go, okay, this is possible. So what would it take for you to love Airbnb more than a hotel? Personally, I do love Airbnb more than a hotel. I personally believe a hotel can sometimes be the loneliest place on the planet. But Airbnbs have got that flavor to them, that sort of something special. You knock on the door, the host welcomes you around, or if the host isn't there, like some of us prefer, there's a little brochure which tells you where everything is, how to get everything. The apartment's stocked with water, toiletries, how to use the PlayStation. There's Netflix. It's logged in. It's ready to go. There's coffee. It smells good. That's the 6-star experience, right? What about 7-star? You know what? You rock in, and the experience is personalized. Maybe there's a card. We've rocked into hotels. Welcome. Well, thing is hotels. Sometimes they put the champagne bottle and the card, but there's something unpersonal about it. I don't know why. It's just me. Maybe I'm expecting too much, but there's a personalization. There's a, hey Stu, personal note. Maybe it's like, hey, I checked out your profile. I know you guys love the beach, or I know you like to run. There's a great gym. I've got you a pass so you can go down that gym. By the way, I booked you a thing at a local restaurant for breakfast. It's my favorite place. And I've also got you a Uber voucher so you can go and order Uber Eats. That would be amazing, right? I'd love that. And by the way, if you like surfing or you want to go and do something, feel free to take my surfing board. It's in there. There's 3 or 4 wetsuits. I know you're a big lad. So there's a big one I borrowed off my friend who's a big lad. Away you go, right? That's a 7-star. Now let's take it up to a 10. Now this is kind of where Airbnb broke the mold a bit. And imagine this is where our sort of widget lives. Theirs was, you get off the plane, you're welcomed by 5,000 high school kids. They're cheering your name. The car pickup is ready. You arrive at Airbnb and there's a press conference waiting for you there. Crazy. Sounds awesome. You've got a smile on your face already. What about your 10-star? Maybe it's a limo. Comes and picks them up. You sit down, you have lunch. There's a speaker there. their favorite speaker who talks to them about whatever they want to. The bot goes off and does this stuff, brings it back. Whatever yours might be, get ideated. What does it if you could give yourself the best possible experience, what would you look and there again, Airbnbs. Show up at the airport, Elon Musk is there, you're going to space. I don't know, that's not really South African accent, but you get the idea. So that was their framework. And that was how they were able to come backwards and identify, you know what, we could do that. And we could personalize some of your experience. And we could give a rating system they put in place, which will enable them to reward those who do create that experience. So again, wanted to start off with that by just saying, if you want to create a great experience, you kind of got to start by thinking beyond just what you do now and come up with one or two key things that really, really work. However, principle number 3, once you have identified the things that work, don't try and go, okay, now we've got this bot thing that Stu said we should do, or, we're going to do limo pickups for everyone, or we're going to wash people's cars when they come to the office or whatnot. Don't try and do it for everybody. Just start by doing it for one client. And the reason for starting with one, and there's a whole bunch of them, is some of the things you're going to identify are just going to be too hard. They're not going to scale. And then you probably shouldn't focus on those. And particularly as you start to get, you can roll this out to 2 and then 5 and then 10, and you might hit a barrier at 50 and go, we're going to have to find a new way of doing this. It's not going to be viable for every single client gets a menu and they order, from one of 10 restaurants around the place and we go out and get it. That's not going to work, right? But when you start at 1, you can start to identify some elements that, this could work. We're starting to build a simple system for getting it done for 1, which means we can refine it. Let me give you the background to it. Their advice in the podcast was to just focus on 1, to identify first the magical elements from scale. And I love this story. They hired a photographer to follow a guy from London who was called Ricardo around on one of his trips around San Francisco. And Ricardo did all of the things that, sometimes people do in San Francisco when they don't really know the place. Ricardo went to Alcatraz all by himself, and he got the headset and he wandered around and looked around, and that was it, went home. He went and ate at Bubba Gump, which isn't that bad, but it's not exactly the best restaurant in San Francisco. He stayed in a budget hotel. He probably wandered to a hotel bar, one of the dive bars alone, didn't talk to anybody, sat at the bar as anybody who's been to an American bar. It's not exactly a British pub. It's more of a sit there and stare at your drink kind of thing. And what they had is they had the team, once he'd gone, they had the team get together on a storyboard. What would be the perfect trip for Ricardo? So they flew him back. This is their investing in 1. And they invested quite a bit to try and scale it backwards. They had a driver pick him up at the airport, the best Airbnb they could find. He went to some dinner parties. They had the best seats at restaurants. They booked him into a midnight mystery bike tour. And at the end of it, they said, hey, Carter, how was your trip? And he was like, it was amazing. Best trip ever. And the point they made is once they knew they had this blueprint, okay, dinner party plus good restaurants plus midnight bistro tour plus pre-booked ride. They knew they had the blueprint. They could do it for 1 person. And they said, okay, how can we do it for 100 million people? How can we make these experiences which people tack onto their stay really, really easily so they could do it 100 million times? And this became their Airbnb trips piece. And if anyone's seen it, it's pretty good. I mean, it's not something you'd use every time, and I'd argue that it's not yet got optimum traction. But we recently went to the Blue Mountains, and the ability to look at it and go, wow, there's an observatory. We could do some stargazing with the kids, or we'll go to the glowworm tunnel. And tack that onto our trip. Took it from being just staying in a house to being an experience. So this is the opportunity for you to go, okay, I've got 1 magical piece in here that I want to plunk in. I'm just going to do, maybe 2 or 3. Let's test it out and see if we can do it for 1 or 2 or 3 clients and then move it from there. Bear in mind, I wanted to add on this piece. If you've done the module, frictionless with me, you'll know all about Gould's law. John Gould was actually a pediatrician, but he also wrote books on systemization, which is interesting. But one of the things he observed is most problems that people have with complexity in systems, in other words, complex systems don't work, are primarily because what they did is they tried to build a complex system on the blueprint from scratch, and they launched it and didn't work. Every single complex system in the world started out life as a simple system. So before you go trying to plug in active campaign automation or whatever it might be, make sure that you can do it manually and simply. And once you're able to do it manually and simply, you can then start to add in the technology, the complexity. Build anything you're going to do. Focus on simplicity over speed, effectiveness over efficiency, and then build in the rest of it later on. It's just a trap I want to make sure you don't fall into. The second part of this I want to mention, I think is really relevant regardless of whether you are, focusing on just experience. The general rule of automation is the more automation you have in a process, the more human oversight that automation will require. So if you're building an automated workflow system, if you're going to automate your outbound, you need to have someone in your business whose specific role it is to understand how to maintain it, fix it, monitor it, and make sure it doesn't break. Because last thing you want is an automated system that sends out a bunch of emails and you pick it up a week later to realize it's been doing it all by itself or whatever it might be. And you've just realized that it's broken, because that's a hell of a thing to try and fix. Makes sense. Okay. Let's talk about number 4. One of the big things I learned from my tech startup stay, if you like, was the importance of experimentation. Lean Startup was a book by Eric Ries. It's a bit of a Bible in Silicon Valley, but it talks about a very different idea of launching business ideas. It talks about ideation. It talks about A/B testing, which is the ability of not just focusing on one way that things could work, but trying 3 or 4 different ways. Because often, when you just try one, you try and optimize one route to success, you actually miss that there's 3 or 4 different ways of doing it, and one of those might actually be the best way. That's why you'll see such a fast turnover of tech startups changing their business model, trying different things, because they know the more they try, the more likely they are to hit pay dirt. And pay dirt is finding a model that has market demand, gets traction, is easy to deliver, and grows exponentially. So in doing this, I want you to play around. I want you to experiment. I want you to go, okay, we're doing it this way right now, but what if we did it some different ways? Videos are a really good example of this. If you're not using video, but maybe for your client messages or audio, or you haven't played with, video updates or even video SOAs or whatever it might be, then please have a bit of an experiment. I remember about 3 years ago now, I started to use Voxer in our business, and one of my clients at the time, James, he was like, I love this Voxer thing, but I'm not sure about doing it with clients. And I was like, okay, what are you concerned about? I'm just not sure how they'll take it. And we were like, okay, well, tell you what, pick the clients that you know are most amenable to technology, like the personal touch, and, are less likely to sort of arc up at technology, and try it with those ones and see how it goes. Again, this is the whole start with one. And he did. The reaction was great. So we tried a few different ways of doing it, started to roll out to more clients, and it became one of the primary ways that he'd communicate. He'd get a question from the client, he'd grab his Voxer, he'd record a quick audio message, send it back, and clients, it wasn't just faster for him. It didn't just allow him to respond to things more quickly and on the run, but they loved it. They loved the personal touch. So again, it's an example of, trying something out, measuring their success, implementing and building on it, and having this cycle going. And it comes straight back down to another thing that the Airbnb, or the number 4 or the final thing I want to share today, which is, I've seen this time and time again. Phil Knight's fantastic book / audiobook, Shoe Knight, is one of those books, much like Walter Isaacson's Jobs, which is just such a phenomenal insight into how the success story behind something, behind Nike in this case. But one of the most poignant parts in the whole story was at the end. He sold his business for $100 million. And as he was sat there with the check, rich beyond his wildest dreams, after years and years of struggling to get this shoe company, his comment was, if I had one wish in the world, it was that I could go back and do it again. And this is something you see time and time again. People who build successful business from scratch have the fondest memories of not when they, made their first 100 million, or it's when they started. They look back at it and go, those were amazing times. They were such progressive times. And, actually I've got the wrong wording here, but let me break through and just tell you the crux of it. The recommendation here that Brian made is, don't wait until later on before you start playing with things, before you ask a question, what if we do it this way? What if we do it that way? What if we try things out? Because a lot of the times we tell ourselves, when we've got a bit more money or a bit more time or a bit more space, when got a bit more into our groove, we'll try some different things out. The truth is, the best time to experiment is when things are starting. you're most likely to experiment. You're most likely to play with it, because when things are established, when things are running, not only will you not have the time, but things will be much more complex. Going back to Gould's law, it'll be much harder to unwind things. So play with this stuff ahead now. Experiment, test things out, because not only will you have the time for it, but you might just find a little bit of gold there, a little gem in there, which you can utilize for your own purposes. Final thing before we dive into the doing, and I'm going to share with you how to do it. Strong suggestion is go analog before you go digital. In all of when I plan out webinars or when I'm sort of sketching out things like this, I really like to grab a pen and paper. I use a digital pen. I use an iPad, which gives me the same benefit, because what I'm actually trying to avoid here is I'm trying to avoid that thing where you have a keyboard or a mouse in front of you, right? Because when that happens and you're using a tool like a PowerPoint or an Adobe Acrobat, the problem is you're actually operating on two levels. You've got this idea, you need to get it out, being creative. And then you've got this tool that you've got to be technically capable of using, and that's what gets in the way. So when you're planning out your experience, when you're mapping it out, I've given you some tools in here. I've given you the PDF if you really, really have to go PDF. But my strong suggestion, if you can, print it out. Even if you get a blank sheet of paper and draw this up, get a whiteboard and some colored pens or a big sheet of butcher's paper and really go analog, and you'll see the ideation comes to life a lot faster than if you do it that way. It's a good rule for everything, by the way. Go analog before you go digital. Okay, that's the principle. Let's get stuck into the doing part of it. And the first piece I want to point out is the key component to this is to understand that there's a lot of pre-existing material that we're going to provide you, a lot of templates in there. In addition, you've probably got a lot of content already that form part of your current service delivery model or communications you've put out in the past. Maybe there's some marketing material or brochures or stuff you've worked on elsewhere in the program. And these are all components. These are all things we can plug into your experience. So doing a bit of a stock take and gathering all that together is a key part of knowing what you can sort of deploy at a certain point in time. Having said that, it's also, I think, really important to put some categories around this, to understand that whenever you're putting a communication out or you're doing something that's a touch point to a client, there has to be an intention around it. There has to be a purpose. And if we break it down into three categories, it enables you to take all these bits and pieces and make sure that they're serving the right purpose. It also enables you, when you start to plan out the sequence, of understanding that it's important to kind of mix it up a little bit. So the first category here is, broadly speaking, about informing and involving, which is kind of stuff that is designed to tell clients what they need to know at a point in time. And I always think it's better, rather than just do a data dump, but think about, okay, the clients need to know about that there, but they don't need to know about that later on. There's a famous sort of story that's told about Bill Gates, when he was talking to one of the Microsoft design teams, and they're obviously excited. They're meeting Bill Gates, and they start telling him about this software thing, and he's going to be on stage and be presenting about it, and he's going to be telling the world about it. And he said, stop, just a moment. When am I presenting on this? And they said, it's about 6 months. He said, guys, I really appreciate you letting me know, but please don't give me the details now, because I will forget it, and I'll just have to learn it again. So there's a man who understood very well that managing the information that he was giving himself access to or being exposed to was really, really important. So similarly, there's going to be things that you might need to know for your client. Now you can lump all of this into one category, and I've given some examples here. But generally speaking, I think there's certain pieces of information which are really about briefing, giving the right information at the right time. There's certain things which may be deployed in order to clarify certain aspects of what people are going through or why you do things. There's certain communications that you might put out to simplify things. Classic case in point, FDS statements. I've worked with a lot of people on the best strategy to put those out, and I've always found one of the best ways to do it is to put out a communication, less important now, but it's probably important with the renewals. Before you actually send the renewal, put out a document, which is almost like one of those, this is what a dummy document looks like. Jane Doe, this is your name and address. If this is wrong, please let us know. There's a call out. Services received. There's a little pop out, on the paper that says, this is a list of all the services that we're going to be providing over the next 12 months. If you have any questions about, you know what I mean? You're explaining what each of the components are. So when the actual, statement comes with their name on it and with the actual things on it, they know what they're reading. So this is simplifying it. And there's a few examples here. As well as you might have communications which are fundamentally designed to make it easier or more convenient or simpler for clients to this might explain how to do certain things. And I've given you a few examples from us. Sending out a key contacts list is a really key, important way of, letting them know that if you need to contact the team, you deal with the team for this. You don't come straight to the advisor. An events calendar, if you run events, that can be a great way of sort of preempting what's coming up. An explainer around the wealth pyramid. If you've used that in the first appointment, you can repeat that. You can explain and make it the basis of how you're engaging and really understand, really hitting home, explaining it that this is the journey we're on. So every time we sit down and we talk about the strategies and all this stuff we're doing and the actions and we get deep in the detail, understand it's fundamentally about that journey from A to B. Make sense? You might undertake a fact-finding online meeting to help make it easier for them to run through the fact-finding process. So that's that. I won't go into detail around this. The second kind of touch point is what I call teach and motivate. This is really about doing a few different things. Often it's about training clients on how to work with you. In the absence of you telling them how to communicate, how to get stuff through to you, where they upload it, send it by email, do they use the portal, they will default to whatever they think is the best option. Taking a leadership position, letting them know what's coming on the road ahead. Really important part with retention. Making the clients know that, this is where we're at, this is where we want to get, this is what's going to happen in the next 6 months, this is what's going to happen in the next 12 months. Sometimes your communications might be to spotlight a certain area. Savings check-in is a really clear example. Just 3 months now, I'm going to check in with you. We're going to find out how much money is in that savings account. And if there's not enough money in the savings account that we've agreed, we may want to jump in and do some work on your cash flow management. You might want to do a behavioral piece to spotlight, budgeting or how to make decisions. That's another example. As well as sometimes even just a communication which is about encouraging them. That something's going well, that they've taken the step that 90% of Australians never do. But ultimately, anything which keeps them engaged, excited, and understanding what it's all about and helps them to understand how to work with you is better. One thing I've learned from watching military-style trainers, how clear they are about their instructions, because they make this assumption that whatever instruction they put out is probably going to be misunderstood. So they're very, very clear about it. So that's how they get, when they say something, you instantly know what you're supposed to do most of the time. The final area here is anything which has the intention of having a really positive emotional impact. So exciting them about the decision they've made. Or just putting a smile on their face, delight. So things like showing them what you delivered versus what you say you do, giving them an implementation summary, or asking for feedback and then circle back. What do you think we could do better? Then they give you some feedback on what you could do better. And you basically say, we're going to do that. And then you implement it and tell them, thanks very much for that feedback. We've implemented it. A little bit of appreciation can really help. Welcome kits, I think, are hugely important. Using personal, like Loom or any cloud app, just to record a quick personal message, and scheduling a 6 months check-in call. Just say, how do you want to check in? See how you're going. You can potentially make an offer to expand the scope by helping friends, family, or peers, and make the offer with no strings attached. Or one of the things I like to do, which if you get an opportunity to introduce people to other people, clients, contacts, because it's in their best interest, that can be another good way of sort of adding value above and beyond the scope of advice. Does that make sense? So again, the action here for you is, there's a whole bunch, just to give you a bit of framework to categorize things, but also to look at what you're already doing and put it through the lens of not what you're delivering, but importantly, not the stuff thing, what's the impact, what's the value of it? I'm not going to go through this in detail because if you go through the touch point examples, it's all there. But these are an example of worded touch points that we've used and implemented with businesses. Things around, welcome to our world, which is typically about letting people know about who to contact, terminology. There's, fundamentals, which is ultimately, here goes another one there, which is about letting people know about the philosophies behind your business, check-in emails, request for data, and establishing the method of updating, information or data, fact finds, team touch points, getting on the front foot with making sure the team are at the forefront of managing communications. There's an example here of an email which is about sort of positioning the journey toward their end game and the fact that this is early stage. There's a whole bunch on there about how to structure blogs and articles. The let us know list, which is a really important touch point in there. Outreach, welcome emails and a whole bunch of stuff. Go through there. And not only, feel free to take those. I would strongly suggest wording them to suit yourself. I make my emails explicitly or specifically long-winded, because I find that when I do that, people take it and they rewrite it themselves, because I really want this stuff to sound like you, not like me. And by the way, just a killer tip, dictation is by far the best way. But go through, have a look at that. It might sort of, it might inspire the creative juices. You might identify, you know what, we've got something similar to that, or we do something like that. But put together your library, because when you've got your library, it is a lot easier for you to deploy certain things in this next component, which is where the rubber hits the road. Okay, what I'm going to do in this next part is I'm going to walk you through the general scope of it. Now, as you can see, I've already drawn all over this one, so we should be able to go through and have a good look at it. But broadly speaking, let me see if I can just work this one out. Let's rub some of this stuff out. No, I don't know how to do that. All right, we'll just go with it. So this is an example of a journey that's mapped out. And I might actually just come out of here quickly so I can give you a bit of an overview of it in detail. So what I've done here is I've mapped out a really basic example of one that I might deploy. And I've used my own kind of legend. So I popped in there and I'm going, okay, there are certain things that happen which are going to be human-to-human interactions. And I find that the human-to-human stuff is usually the most impactful, you know? So that's marked there. But I've actually used color coding to sort of mark out when one of my touch points is an involve, inform, when one of my touch points is about teaching and motivate, and one of them is excite, delight. The reason I do that is because I find that if I can do that, what happens is I start to get visibility of when things are happening and when they should happen, if that makes sense. Okay, so as you can see, the beginning of my process, I've got my first contact call. So that it starts kind of in that new client engagement process at the very beginning. I'll do that as I go. And then I've kind of got no communications in my experience between the first and second appointment. I have my first meeting and bang, straight away, I've got my initial sort of touch points. I am rolling out straight after that meeting. I've got my personal Loom video. Hey, this is Stuart here. I just wanted to follow up our meeting by saying, thank you so much for the opportunity to meet with you. I'm so glad we're going to be working together. And I want to outline sort of where we go from here and what the experience is going to be. Now, the interesting thing about that video is that could be scripted. That could have a framework to it. And I believe under the video mastery section, we have the right sort of script for it. But you could just roll that out. It will, you know, using a tool like Loom or a cloud app or, you know, whatever it might be, you can record it from your browser, much like I'm recording right now, and have it uploaded, ready to send in an email with a link very, very quickly. And you know what? It's probably going to take you less time. Once you've got the framework, once you know, it starts with hello, acknowledge, thank, outline where we're going, it'll take you less time to produce than the email would. Okay, so that's my first touch point. Once I've got that, I've got my personal Loom video. The next thing I want to put out there is I have a welcome kit. Again, there's a module on the members site which is all about welcome kits. But this is kind of like sent out, we outsource ours, and it goes out and away it goes. That's not going to work, is it? Yeah, it goes out there. And as a result, one of the first things my clients receive is the welcome kit, which has got bits and pieces in there. Bang. And then, in this case, in this scenario, I'm modeling a business that has a portal like a My Prosperity. So you can see the next touch point there after my to delight is a bit of a teach and motivate. We're sending out access to the portal so people know that they can jump in there. They can use that portal, My Prosperity, for the data gathering. Bingo. We're away. I've then got my second touch point, which is generally it's going to be my data gathering. Different people are different ways, but in this case, the scenario I've modeled is one of the team members jumping on and doing a face-to-face session on Zoom to go through the fact find, gather some information. Then we sort of put it together. We've got the next touch point, which is a face-to-face strategy blueprint, and we're putting together advice and we're presenting the advice. So you notice there's a couple of big touch points early on, which are really about triggering sort of not buyer remorse, buyer satisfaction, and one that's just putting the portal front and center for the very beginning. And then because we have a real focus on advice, we tend to lay off that until we hit about 6 weeks. Is it 6 weeks? Well, actually, there's probably we're assuming this is going to go from day 14 to 60. So the advice presentation could be anywhere from there to there, but we start our process at about the 6 week mark. It starts by sending out an events calendar. You know, this is what's coming up, which is really about teaching them the stuff coming up in the 12 months. Then, is that teach? That's inform. Then we send out our key contacts piece, letting the clients know and really getting in early in those first 90 days to let them know there are certain people you will want to contact for certain different things. It will not all go through the advisor. And in many cases, it will be the team who just confirm that with them. Then at about that start, that implementation piece, the confirmation of implementation could happen at any point, really, when it's up from sort of 14 to 60, but I've just put it in there, which is there is a confirmation. You know what? Everything implemented. We're on our way. As far as we're concerned as a business now, we are now into working together on an ongoing basis to make sure that it all stays in place. So the next bit up is that I'm introducing is a series of sort of 4 emails, all about using my portal. If you've done a bit of work with me on portal stuff, and when one of my biggest sort of observations is a lot of businesses, they buy portals with the intention that their clients will use it and they launch it, but they never actually teach clients. They never actually got adoption. As a result, 2 weeks down the track, they realize, 2 years down the track, they realize the clients aren't really using it. They're not really using it, and they eventually withdraw from it. So we've got an email here, which is, here's how to use our portal. Here's second email. Here's another thing you can use it for, and here's another thing you can use it for. What I'm doing there is I'm breaking down the usage into 3 parts. It's similar to what I've done in the Welcome to Our World example, where, we want to give them all the information about who to work with and what things are, but we break it down. And then at the end of it all, we give a bit of a summary. Summary of, okay, here's all the information we told her, here's the one cheat sheet, but because we've gone into detail before, it makes more sense. The next touch point is about month 3, where I send out what's the let us know list. Again, if you've done work with me on review renovation or client engagement blueprint, you'll know the let us know list is really an infographic with 16 things that your client should contact you to discuss if any of them changes. And it's really about priming clients to understand that ongoing management of the financial plan just isn't about, them sitting back. It's about them recognizing that when things change, when there's decisions to be made, when things need to happen, they need to get on the front foot and contact you. And that happens pretty regularly, but we get right on the front foot straight away. The next thing we do here is about month, is that 5? Probably about month 4, actually. There's 6. We're sending out page 30 email. Now that, again, is drawn from the template, and really that is an educational piece. That's a piece and it sort of lets people know that, advice is like a 1,000-page novel. And if we get it right at the end of it all, you ride off into the sunset, the hero, and you have the life of your dreams. We're on about page 30. So I want to let you know that I'm going to take you through each chapter along the way. And if we do these things right, and we follow the system, we're going to get there. So it's very much about owning the time ahead. And, exciting them about how much better it's going to get in the future. There's another thing here. And again, people keep focused. I'm kind of knowing the road ahead by probably sharing a case study, which is kind of a picture of where they may get to in 5 years. So there's where they're at now. We pick a case study from your library, which is, this is a client I want to share with you because you could be there in 5 years. So you keep them focused about what's possible, and you keep them looking to make progress and understanding what might need to happen. About month 6, I've scheduled a mid-year personal check-in in year 1. So check-in, everything's good, get some feedback. And then shortly afterwards, I'm going to jump in with, hey, by the way, did you know, if you have any of your family members who need some help or colleagues, more than happy to help you. As a valued client, we often get referred, people who are special in their lives, they need a little bit of advice, and we're happy to assist without any sort of, trying to convert them all the rest of it unless they want it. Again, that's an opportunity to kind of expand the conversation. Here, I've got a touch point, which is all about a teach and motivate, which is a progress check-in. Just kind of like, hey, almost like a check-in email. Hey, Stu, it's Stu here. I just want to check in. How are you going with cash flow? How are you finding, how are you going with this component? Usually it's something that they have been required to do something for you is the best. Finally, just before we get stuck into the pre-review, we kind of send out an email, which is all about, let's move that over here. That would probably work better. Yeah. We send out an email that is all about reminding people of the why. And I think there's an example I've given about why the why is really important. I talk about it a lot, by the way, in some of the programs, particularly around the foundations, where we talk about the strategy focus map and the importance of having a vision and knowing what you want. We talk about a lot as well in the first appointment about one of the number one things that stop people from getting their goals is they don't have a vision of what they want to achieve. So that's an email really teaching and motivating them to stay connected with the end game, whatever it was they want to achieve, and don't lose sight of it, because that's what matters. Before we get stuck into our review warm-up, which review warm-up email 1, email 2, email 3, and finally the review itself. So very quickly, I've mapped out what I want to happen, and the components that helps me understand is it helps me to understand this sequencing that's going to be around my review process. It helps me understand, what happens in terms of my engagement process, and importantly, it also helps me scope out what needs to happen in between, which can come into we can map that out in the process of when things need to happen timing wise. We can put templates in there. We can assign actions to individual people. We can put them into our workflow. We can define whether these are sent out from a template in our system, as well as whether they're lined up as part of an email automation within something like an active campaign. Does that make sense? Hopefully so. So that's us mapping out an example of a journey. As you go through this, one of the things I want to remind you to do is there's a couple of different ways you can do this. So the first way you do this is you can just focus on year 1, which is essentially what I did. You can go, okay, I'm going to focus on building out an experience model, which starts with a new client at this end. My new client pops in here, and then out of the back of it is my year 1 review. By the way, one of the things I didn't talk about, and I probably should have, is, it's worth sitting in here and actually defining what your metrics are. So metrics, to know that you get this right, referrals might be one of them. If you do a really good job in year 1, you might get a referral through. So that would be a good measure of your experience. Turnaround times would be a good way of measuring, whether this is working. If you notice that clients tend to get data back straight away, it means your experience is working. Another one you might want to put in there would be, client satisfaction scores. If you run surveys, if you're doing a good job, once you implement this, your client satisfaction scores should go up. Client survey systems are a really great module for that as well. So putting down some metrics around how am I going to measure will also give you the opportunity to do I'm building it, I'm putting out there, I'm checking the metrics. You know what? I've noticed that putting that in there, experimenting, this is doing a really good job. But you might want to grab this, sit down with your team and go, let's nail that first year's experience. You might even focus, by the way, some people tend to focus on, let's just nail that first 90 days. But what you're going to be able to do is map this out. Another thing I want to sort of put in place, you might want to do 3 versions of this, or 2. If you've got 2 packages, you've got one for your platinum clients or your top clients, you've got one for your sort of normal clients, then you've got one for your reactive model. Why not create versions for each of these? And then you may have more of these kind of touch points in for more of these kind of touch points at the top, your face-to-face stuff for your clients, and more of the teach and engage, motivate stuff for other clients. So sometimes breaking it down and having them side by side can work really well. I've done this with different business units within a business. You might have a mortgage broking team, you might have an accounting team, and you might have a financial planning team. And I think getting together to look at the touch points can be really, really important to make sure that you're not overloading clients from 3 different angles at the same time. The other opportunity here is you can do one for year 2 and beyond. You could say, okay, rather than starting with new clients, we'll start with the touch point being the moment a review kicks off through to the next review. What might need to happen? I've seen businesses, they go, let's do year 2, and let's do year 3, and let's do year 4. If you've got accumulator clients, by the way, year 3 is an interesting one to watch out for. The year 3 itch, where you've done the insurance, you've done the super, and they're sitting there going, why am I paying for advice? This would be an opportunity to really be aware of that and possibly put some content in there which is about personal touch. It's about reminding them of the road ahead. It's about introducing the case studies in them 5-year as a retention strategy and keeping them focused on the fact that just because we've done this bit doesn't mean, that bit's not coming up soon if we want it to. Hopefully that makes sense. For me, the next bit, once you've watched this, you got your head around the key components. You got around the fact that the first thing is understanding that flow. Understand the people you're dealing with, the likely way they're engaging you, when they're going to be fully motivated, when they're going to be engaged, when they're going to be dropping off, when they might need a bit of a kick, when they might need to be reminded of how to work with you, when you might need to jump on the front foot and let them know what certain things are all about. In other words, getting personal. We talked about, as you're approaching this, pull together all of your stuff that you've already got, but have an opportunity to think a bit bigger. Once you look into the clients and go, we can do this special thing But when you're doing that, kind of don't put barriers around it. Think about, well, what could we do if money and all that sort of stuff wasn't an object? But when you come and do it and you're trying to get something going, start by focusing on making the process simple. Just trying to do it, manually for a couple of clients. Don't fall into Gall's Law's trap. And then experiment. And ultimately, starting analog is the really big place to do. If you're going to put this in place, if you haven't already gone through and looked at the experience checklist, it's a good idea to kind of go through that, understand what you're already doing well, what you can improve on, do a bit of a stock take of what you've already got that could go into this model. I think, ask this question, is there something you do well or would like to do that could be your Ricardo moment, your 11-star blueprint piece? Because if you've got something there and you're kind of like, there's a good chance if it's different and it's special and it works for your audience, you could create one just killer, high-value thing that you could just do that would just blow everyone's socks off. Review the touchpoint examples I've given you in the tools. Decide on 5 to 10. My strong suggestion with this is don't try and put 20 or 30 or 40 touch points in there. Just choose 5 good ones to supplement what you're doing or 10. And just be able to do those ones to start with. Start small and grow out. But for me, sketch out your 1 to 2 year journey. Really get clear on that. Work with your team. Get comfortable. Check the simulate. What you're delivering at what point in time. Whether you got things too close together, whether it's the right kind of things in there, and then you'd be ready to go. So if that's all you're looking at for this first part, if you just want to understand how to map out an experience, maybe your next piece is to kind of dive into some of the delivery stuff. Maybe you need to systematize this so you can jump into some of the process mapping examples. But there is a follow-up to this. If you're doing this as part of the fast track, this is where you need to go next. You need to head over to communicating your value. Because this is the next piece where we take all of these touch points and we realize that as well as putting them out there, the quality of your communication, how you structure it, the tone you use, some of the stories you tell, but also the medium you use and how you do it in such a way that makes it easy so you can repeat it. It's scalable. It doesn't take a lot of effort is going to be really, really key. And if that's where you're at, if you've got everything in there, now the next bit is to work out how can we make this communication piece something that's easy to do, is systematic, and most importantly brings to the fore your sort of point of difference and your tone and your team's voice. Other than that, I hope it's been useful. If you like it, would love you to share some comments. Otherwise, I'll speak to you soon. Take care. So there you have it, another episode of the Finnovator done and dusted and popped into the back pocket. I hope you got a lot out of that. It is a big topic. And it's one of the courses that form part of our Practice Foundations program, and it's one of the projects that I often do work with clients I work with through our Practice Evolutions coaching program on a regular basis. I'm also going to run a short course on this topic a little bit later in 2024. For those of you who are familiar with our fast track programs, these are between 4 to 6 week short courses where over that period of time I walk you through each of the topics. It's very peer driven, it's very interactive, and it's very action orientated. We're running one in February around pricing called Bulletproof Pricing. I'm going to be doing one on client experience a bit later in the year. I'm going to be doing one on value proposition and client acquisition called Quality Clients. And then we're also going to do one on client onboarding called The First 90 before we round off the year with one at the end of the year, which is appropriately called Ending the Year. So if you are interested in joining these short courses, i.e., you don't feel you need a full-time coach or access to a full-time coaching resource thing like our Practice Foundations program, these are a really good way of working on a key area of your business, getting access to relevant tools, templates, and ultimately working through with me and a group of peers in an action-orientated sort of period of time to get things done. So if you're interested, I would strongly suggest head over to success.ourdarray.com.au, check out the events page, and then and indicate you're interested, and we'll give you more information about how to sign up, costs, and a whole bunch of other things. Other than that, please take a moment to leave a review. It's a huge difference when somebody rocks up and they're wondering what the hell the Finnovator is, who's it for, and they can see reviews from actual listeners who indicate where it's good, where it's not so good, who it's for, what they've got out of it, and a whole bunch more. So it would really do me a solid if you could head over and just leave a quick review. Other than that, I hope you're having a great year, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Finnovator.